Dead Sea is a sea full of Jesus blood. That's not true. Like, who told you that? So yeah, we would love to have that. No, obviously I don't want to talk to children. Can I just make that abundantly clear?
Hello.
Footwork. Are you a Christian?
Yes.
His name's Finger Dude, but why did you accept that?
Except what?
What's your name?
Uh, uh,
What?
my name's Taylor. Sorry.
Wait,
Yeah.
am I seeing? Am I like? Is there a delay? I'm seeing two different names. Maybe is my TikTok
I
feed?
see two different names as well. Finger Dude and Foot Wook.
Look, it's a band, Wookie Foot.
But are you Finger Dude?
Either it doesn't matter. I mean,
No, it's a different profile picture too, though.
How is that working? Like on the?
I just changed it. That's probably why it's updating
Oh
maybe on your
wow.
end.
Okay, I thought it was so funny because I was like Finger Dude. That's and I called you Footwork, but I did read
Yeah.
Footwork.
Secret
Yeah.
identity.
Footwork.
I thought we
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Clark
I can't
Kented the
talk to you.
Superman.
The next thing you know, you're also the Holy Spirit. You're a three in one, and I can't handle that right now. Um,
Okay.
no, I'm
And
just
Joel's not
joking.
accepting any new deities.
Oh,
Foot Dude Fingerwork. Are you a Christian?
yes. Yeah, I believe in Jesus and the
I'm sorry.
resurrection.
Oh, why?
Um, I mean,
Yeah,
I think
tough
a
question
lot
to
of it
answer.
is right. Yeah. So, because part of it is deeply personal, but I mean,
Hmm.
what sort of metric are you looking for? Are you looking for like a sort of
Well,
personal
let's just go.
experience or?
Let's just go with the prompt. Why not
Okay.
dump the Bible?
Um, I think the Bible is, I mean, even if you're not a believer or a so-called Christian, the Bible is really useful. It's got tons of different literary forms in it. It's got poetry, narrative, history.
Yeah, so
It
maybe
has,
I'll just say like I don't mind keeping it in a library. So like we don't have to burn them all or anything
okay.
like that. But I'll just say
Okay,
like
so like in
why
your
not?
personal life?
Yeah, like why don't well, let's just dump the belief. Like let's just dump dogma, the doctrine, the actually thinking that there's a God that exists that is in the Bible. Just get rid of that. So other than that, why not do that? We got some
I mean,
bars,
obviously, the Bible's stuck around for a long time. It outlasts
obviously.
like lots of kingdoms. I mean, it's survived a lot of, let's say, egregious misinterpretations or misapprehensions of it. It's led to
Unscathed.
huge,
I don't. I would say
um,
that we don't know that to like. I would say that it's like who knows what the correct interpretation of the thing is.
I mean, we have original manuscripts that are,
No, but we're talking about
from.
interpretation.
Oh, if you're
Like,
talking about like a modern interpretation, I think the most
I thought you
important
meant like an
interpretation.
interpretation of the words that are like not just the like from Hebrew to English or Greek to English, but like the interpretation of what it's trying to say or the
You mean
understanding of
to
it
you, like if
to
you were reading it?
anyone, to literally
Okay.
anyone ever at
Yeah.
any time, except for the people that wrote it, that who knows what any of them were, uh, you know, trying to get across.
Yeah. I mean, if you read like the New Testament, for example, you'll read a lot of things. It's
Can I
like,
just say a bit of a PSA to most people? Don't do it. Like, can I just say, like, if you, especially the Christians, do not, if you want to maintain your Christianity, don't do it. Don't read
If
that.
Jesus makes you feel safe or comforted and you want to maintain that relationship, you're going to want to go ahead and stick to the Gospels.
Avoid, avoid, avoid.
Yeah.
um, yeah, so you could read like, many things in the New Testament that give very, practical advice about how to live your life, things
Hmm.
that, perspectives that you might not have considered.
Name one.
And I think one of the main ones that's like, I think that's really profound is this idea that faith is something that's very existential. And so, like, Paul makes this point
I'm
that,
laughing
if
because you
you,
just said there's something really practical, and the practical thing is that faith is really existential. That sounds
well, I'll
like
explain it.
not
I'll
practical.
explain it.
Let me first
What
say
could be,
this.
let me
Give
ask you a
him
question. Let
time.
me ask you
Give
a
him time.
question.
He has
Let
to
me ask you a
confuse
question.
himself first,
Let
so
me,
it'll make
okay,
sense.
just
Can I ask you a
give me
question?
everybody stop for a second. Guys, thank you so much for the 100,000 likes. I really appreciate it. That boosted us up into the algorithm. We got 140 people in here. We've got 33 on YouTube. I appreciate you all for being here and watching. Thank you so much. Follow me. Subscribe on YouTube. Link in bio. Let's go. Sorry, footwork. Go ahead.
Okay. So I was going to say
Oh, we're
that
getting a
it's
Justin raid?
practical.
Sorry, we're getting a Justin raid? Is that what we're doing? Thank you,
Um,
Justin, for the raid. Sorry about that. I just didn't.
it's okay.
Turns out we were getting a raid.
So you said like what I said, practical, and then existential, and I
Yeah,
linked
I
those
thought
two
that was,
together.
yeah.
And the reason why is because what could be more practical than something that applies individually to every single person? And so the point that Paul makes in the New Testament is that when you
One
in your
size fits all?
no, it's actually the complete opposite. That's what makes it so profound. Is that
Yeah, but
One
you're
size fits none?
okay? I can explain it if you'd like me to, but if you don't, then that's okay.
I was just asking for clarification. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's all right. So I'll explain it, and then if you don't understand it, then just ask some questions. I'll try to make it more clear.
okay, but
So
we can talk over you too. But anyway, go on.
okay. So in the New Testament, Paul describes this phenomenon where some believers were, being offended over meat that was sacrificed to idols, and he said, if you know that this meat is sacrificed to idols, you know that these idols are nothing,
Yeah, I
and
know the
so that
passage. Move on to the point.
okay. So I'm just providing context for your
Yeah,
listeners too, just in case they
so
don't know it.
they know it too. Go on. So what is the
Okay.
practical thing?
The practical thing is that you can determine in your own heart, based on your own perspectives, about whether or not you want to eat that meat, depending on your own conscience. And the point that makes it profound is that Paul says, now, while you can do what you want in this circumstance, make sure that you're thinking about other people, because some people may not have the same faith as you. And he said, he actually called it a weaker faith, someone that might be offended at eating that meat, because it says it's just meat. It doesn't matter if you eat it or not. And he says that, but if someone with you has weaker faith and it's going to bother them, it's a good ethic. It's a good practical ethic for you to abstain from eating that meat, not to offend your brother. And so he makes this sort of, and that's a deeply existential experience because it comes down to your personal choice, but it's also very practical because it can apply to every single person in any situation.
What's the so the practical part of it is that I got lost in the weeds here somewhere. So like I understand that don't cause your brother to stumble by doing something that they would be offended by because they don't understand things the same way you understand them. Is that what is the practical
Yeah,
message here?
because
Be
here's the thing.
culturally appropriate.
Yeah,
Right, yeah, because here's the thing is you could, if you were to eat that food and then they stumble, then that can confuse them. And someone that has weaker faith, generally, the idea there is that there's someone that Paul delineates this sort of spiritual
but
progression.
hold on. You
Okay.
have to see that the whole description of what like the whole thing you're describing here is like completely impractical, right? Like
In what way?
we're talking about sacrificing stuff to a
Okay,
particular
I'll
god that
make it.
may or may not
Okay.
exist. We're just killing animals and then we're eating it, and we're eating it depending on how we feel, and then trying to understand how other people feel, and never even because they're
Okay, I'll give you a good example from modern day. So you could apply that principle into your modern day, and you say you have a friend who is like 2 years sober from alcohol,
no,
and
yes,
you're
that's
out with your
practical.
friends, and
That's
you could say,
practical.
"Look, I'm
Yeah,
not going to order alcohol in front of my
yeah,
friend who's 2 years sober,
I
and I'm
understand.
going to honor him that way."
That's
So
practical.
that's a practical ethic that
Hmm.
comes down to your personal choice. That there's no reason why you couldn't, but for the sake of that other person, you're going to make that sacrifice. You're going to lay down your right to have alcohol and in service of somebody else. And that's an ethic, a practical ethic that's very existential because it comes down to your personal perspectives based upon the situation that the judgment is yours alone to make.
Yeah, and
And
I think
nothing
that
is
you
more
could do that. I
practical than
think you
that.
could do that with like someone who is also like lactose intolerant. Like, for some reason you're not going to eat cheese around them because maybe they'll want
Sure.
cheese, but they're
Yeah,
going to
you could
shit
do it.
themselves later or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, because some people might be tempted to eat it if they see
Yeah,
you eating
so
it.
those are fine. I think that that's like something that we can come to a conclusion without the like you must like the Paul version of this is like a whole lot of nonsense. And what's so interesting is I've just been reading Exodus, and there's actually very specific laws in how long you have to take before you eat certain meat that was sacrificed to God. Like there's these really weird sort of stipulations that God sets. And in the New Testament, of course, Paul always puts all those things to rest. He's always like, don't worry about it at all. Even if it's these idols, they're not actually real gods, even though the Old Testament thought they were. But these are just like demons, and there's no power there. So feel free to do what you want. But all of that is impractical. All of that doesn't matter. And it's I think that the like story that's going on there, yes, there's this little tiny sliver of it that is like, be mindful of the people around you, is basically, I think, the practical notion that you're trying to pull out of this. But there's just a whole pile of useless nonsense that surrounds it that we don't need. And we can certainly come to this conclusion. We don't need the Bible to say like, oh, if someone's struggling with some sort of like alcoholism or something, we can be mindful of that and try to not tempt them or whatever by we'll just
Right.
have pop.
It makes sense that we wouldn't need the Bible for something like that. I mean, considering that the Bible has been in our psyche, for in the West for 2,000 years. So it makes sense that in our modern day, when we look at things that are very obvious to us now, and we're like, oh, of course I would think about my brother or sister who's struggling with alcohol and I wouldn't drink in front of them.
Yeah, if
We
you
take that for
want
granted.
you want to try to say that comes from the Bible, like
I'm not saying it
we got
comes from the Bible, but I'm
yeah,
saying that
that's
you
stupid.
cannot deny its influence on the situation.
No, I can't. I could deny that, like, in any given moment with any given group of people, if they were to be mindful of a friend, that doesn't necessarily come from the Bible. There could be no connection to the Word of God, like,
Absolutely.
for those people.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's
I'm
all
just
I would
saying,
say. Like,
I'm just saying our mind has been conditioned by the West and Western thought. I mean, if you look at history, all the way from the pre-Socratics to the Enlightenment and where we are today with postmodern thought. I mean, you can track just a timeline of history, and we think along a lot of so many things that are so normal to us to think are things that we have been thinking for thousands of years. And so it would be difficult to be able to just differentiate and say, this comes from my secular mind and this comes from my conditioned mind. Like, we wouldn't be able to draw those lines.
Maybe. I mean, Bert, did you have something to add?
Two things. Resident know-it-all here. So no alcoholic would ever, in a trillion years, ask you not to order a drink in front of them. In fact, they would say that if you sit in the barber shop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. And so, in other words, don't put yourself in. It's about self-responsibility and not expecting things of others, not expecting anything of people, places, or things, because those are things we can't control. You can only control yourself. That's speaking from somebody who has a father and a brother who are both 5 and 20 years sober, respectively.
Awesome.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say, Joel, and this is a complete non sequitur, but did you see what turned up in Australia?
Is it a drowned kangaroo or something like that?
So close. An emperor penguin.
Wow.
How did he get there?
Amazing? Yes, he swam. It's exactly the joke we've been making. It's the funniest news.
He's alive?
Noah's Ark is real. Is this what
It's
you're
real.
telling me,
That's
Bert?
it. I'm
Holy
sorry
shit.
I'm sorry. I sent it to you in the Discord, but I
The
was
Bible's been
immediately thought of you.
validated
Yeah,
again.
that's it. It's proof. Proof
Great.
positive. It's in the
Corey's
pudding.
gonna love that shit. Yeah, I see this now. Take that, anti-flood people. Emperor Penguin turns up on Slave Beach thousands of
But
miles.
it's only
from-
one penguin, you know?
It's just like, what what did I do? Where did I go? That's crazy.
Where am I?
He looks like he's just like this.
I did it, bitches.
I made it. I proved the Bible.
They said it couldn't be done.
Well,
Okay, goodbye.
Bert-
Get me out of here.
oh
That
my
was so
gosh.
funny.
I love when Bert comes to
Yeah,
visit.
Oh, man.
he's so happy about that.
So funny.
Well,
Okay,
this is.
goodbye.
See you later. Bert is always trying to validate the Torah. This is
Wow.
typical rabbi behavior. But that's really funny. But yeah, anyway, the point is that the that one notion, like I feel like we could dump the Bible and we would still be mindful of each other, especially like that particular concept is not like that's not like your super like mainstream Christianity sort of like concept that we all follow and oh, you know, this is totally Christian thought, right? This is like a weird deep cut of Paul. And by the way, you know, disagreed by I believe in Revelations, you're going to see a different opinion. Thank you so much for the heart. And you're also going to see that I think it's in, is it James? Yeah, I think it is James who disagrees. Like, so there's two schools
What do
of
you mean?
thought
Disagrees with what?
with eating with eating a sacrifice something sacrificed to idols, right? Like some of them are like we shouldn't eat that, and then I think there's two passages you'll find where they are like do not do it, and Paul's like go for it, it's nothing. Just that piece of it.
Right. Yeah. The
Mindful piece is just, but that's again, yeah, I feel like is this the best you got?
I mean, I'm not sure what type of answer you're looking for. I mean, you could look
I
at
don't know. It's your call. Like
Okay.
I leave. It's kind of like
I'll
open
say
to
like for
you.
me, I think the Bible is, in terms of its structure, is like one of the most amazing books like I've ever read. Because if you look at, I mean, even if you look at, you said you were reading Leviticus, like if you
Mhm.
look at the Levitical law, and so much of the architecture of that book, like points directly to the ministry of Jesus, which is incredible. And it's like something that I never anticipated when I first started to read the Bible. I didn't really, I believed that there was a God, but I didn't know which one it was because, I mean, what did I know? And so, but I believe there was a God because I've always thought that. I just looked at the world. I'm just like, there's no
What
way
are you
this came
what are
from
you
nothing.
talking about though?
So what I'm getting at is that when I began to read the Bible, like looking, trying to figure out who God was, I started with the Bible, and then when I was reading through the Old Testament, I started to see like a lot of this scripture, like really like points to Jesus specifically in terms of, let's say, like the ministry that he came to fulfill. So like a good example is, you know, like the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. It's like you slay this spotless lamb, or and then you know Jesus is like the spotless Lamb of God, like he died on that exact day of the Jewish festival. Another
Yeah, but
example
do-
is
like,
the
do you-
Passover. So like
Yeah,
they
I
slay
know.
this lamb, they spread the blood,
Uh-huh.
you know, they're delivered from Pharaoh, who is like, let's say, a type and figure of Satan. They are on the Red Sea. They can't get anywhere. They can't make it. They can't survive. There's no way. And then God comes, and let's say through Moses, like parts the Red Sea, and he makes a way where there wasn't a way to be had. And that's kind of like let's say the Christian New Testament
Yeah.
theology is that Jesus
wh-
provides that.
I gotcha. So I would say
Okay.
that like one, you do know that the people that would have written the Jesus story knew the other stories. Like they're it's part of the same
Of
culture.
course.
Like
Yeah,
it
of course.
comes out of the same culture.
Every Sabbath they're read in the synagogues. Yeah.
Yeah, so they know the story, and if they're going to invent a new story that's going to be an offshoot of this thing, they're probably going to, like, especially if they're going to claim that this Jesus is the Messiah, they're going to like point to the old story in some way. But what I
Okay.
love,
Well,
what I
here's the
love,
thing is like, well, the problem with that is that no one in the first century, not even like some of Paul's writings, like really answered those questions. It wasn't until centuries after that people started to really discover the depth of this. Like, and Jesus said himself, like, that this stuff was hidden. Like,
well,
so
I think that it's just like part of the story. Like it's not.
okay.
What do you mean? Like just because somebody didn't make the observation that the Passover vaguely resembles Jesus.
Well, it's not just the Passover, it's so many things.
Yeah,
It's not
because we
just the
can
Passover.
find those connections, my
Right,
friend.
but
They're not hard.
what other book on the planet does that though? I mean,
You
have you
probably could
read
do it. You just don't do it
the
because
I mean, have you read the Vedas, or the Quran? Like they don't do that. They don't do that in those
I
writings.
wonder. I wonder if you could do those types of things. There's
Well, I'm just
part of
saying that
it
there's no book on the
footwork.
planet that does it to that degree. It's incredible when you really look at it
Okay,
historically.
part of it is one, people are finding connections that are just probably not purposely there. They're just like
They're
vague
arbitrary.
connections. Yeah. Like for instance, I heard a guy go, "Hey, in Genesis it talks about they made the ark and they lined it with tar. And then
Right.
Moses is born and they line the basket with tar."
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, yeah,
But-
how are they going to waterproof this stuff in those days? Like,
yeah.
it's
Fair
you know,
point.
if you're
Fair
gonna do,
point.
if
People
you're
can
gonna
take
do
it too
like,
far. Yeah.
yeah, if you're gonna do snakes, they're snakes. Snakes are
Yeah.
scary. We're gonna use snakes.
Yeah.
Like, well, this isn't like
Yeah.
rocket science. But the thing about the Passover and the Jesus thing that I love so much that really I really connect with is that in the Passover story, the people have to do this arbitrary thing. They have to wipe blood on a door so that God will not kill them and essentially save them from himself. He's both
Right.
hero and villain
That's
at the
right.
same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And that's so analogous to the Jesus story is that
Absolutely.
Jesus is
Yeah.
saving us from himself essentially,
Correct.
doing an
Yeah.
arbitrary, useless, unnecessary thing. And I think that that's a beautiful analogy for how pointless Jesus quote unquote sacrifice, non-sacrifice
Right.
was.
So, like, what's interesting though is like in the same way that you make this, it's both God saving us from Himself. He's the one judging us, and then He's also our savior. He's the hero and the villain. And what's interesting is you see those two ideas meet really beautifully in the cross themselves, where Jesus is also, the victim, which is it's incredible when you think about it like that, because
Do you? Is
because
it?
well, yeah, because he's the victim who didn't deserve it. And so, like, that's the
No,
message of Christianity.
He's the God who chose to do it. And it is unnecessary.
Okay,
He
so
did not need to do it, so it was really stupid. The
I
deserve
see,
thing
okay.
doesn't come into it. Like it doesn't matter.
right. So,
He
so like
wanted
according
to.
right. So according to the Christian perspective, we would say that what Jesus did, the reason why he died is because God is fully committed to justice. And so it
Yeah,
is
but that's
just
that's a justice that is
right.
unrecognizable,
So
right?
so the cross is where the unrelenting justice of God meet with his like everlasting mercy and forgiveness. It's both of those, they meet there, and it's a union of opposites. It's a paradox.
Right,
It's something that we
it's
can't see past.
it's almost like incoherent, you might say.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the Bible
Yeah,
calls
yeah,
it
yeah.
actually foolishness. It says that people will say that this is foolish, and that's because God was pleased to shame people who thought they were wise by the foolishness of what was preached. And so
Yeah.
because when you think you know everything,
So the
you can
Bible's
look
kind
at
of
the
telling you
cross.
that it is incoherent. It's admitting that
Right,
this just
yeah,
doesn't make
exactly,
any
yeah.
sense.
Paul makes it very clear that it's foolish, but he says this. He says the foolishness of God is wiser than the wisdom of man. And so when you
Yeah,
look
I
at the
feel
cross
like
of
this
Christ,
is a
you
mincing
see
words, right? Like this is just like you're not really you're saying the one thing going right, but you are actually trying to still say that it's not as stupid and
Well, no,
arbitrary and pointless and
I'm just telling
unnecessary.
you what the Bible teaches about it. It's not. This
Yeah,
is not
right.
necessarily my opinion. This is just what the
Well,
Bible
what's
says.
your opinion? You think that it was a necessary thing for Jesus Christ to kill himself for himself,
No, I don't
to
think
save
that.
us from something that a system that he created?
No, I think it's possible that let's say God existed. I think he could have saved us any way that he wanted to. I think he could have saved us, but like
Do
he
you
could have sent
buy
an
this
angel or
idea?
something.
Do you
But the
buy
fact
this
that he sent
idea?
himself
Do you
is like,
buy
that's
this
what's,
idea? Do you buy this idea of like God is all just sort of thing, even though he is going to send people to hell for eternity, unless you're a universalist, for finite crimes, sometimes just not believing in
okay.
him? Is
I, I,
that justice in
right.
your book?
I, my personal opinion on that is that I don't feel like I'm qualified to bring an accusation against God.
Okay, so
So,
how about this? Would you unalive someone who cursed their parents? Would you
no,
want that on the books? No. Okay. Would you unalive an adulterer? Would you want that on the books in our?
no.
Okay. So you
I
don't
forget.
agree with God's justice, right? So God
No,
is
I
all
said I
just,
wouldn't unalive an adulteress or
but
someone
that's
who like
his
sweared against their
justice. That's
parents.
in his book,
Well,
in his law,
that's
he
like the
says
way,
to do that.
right? It's not like to me that sounds like that's what you understand as justice to be, but that's not actually what his justice is because no
No,
one knows
what are
it.
you talking about? No, this is
Well,
what
like
it is. This
according
is
to
what
the
it is.
Bible, okay.
If God is making laws, if those are supposed to be just, I would assume. So here are the laws that I want you to live by. I am all just. I can't do anything that's not just. So that would say to me that those laws should be just. Now, if you and I both agree that those laws don't seem just, that our definition of just doesn't match most of the laws in the Bible and most of the decisions, like cursing people for their parents' sins or punishing the Amalekites 400 years later for the thing that they did, like those things don't seem just to me, and I would imagine they don't seem just to you. And so if that's the case, then I would say, oh, that this God isn't just. That's something that is
Okay.
not true.
I see your point.
Or if God is all just, and we know that he's all just, he has perfect justice, and that's why Jesus has to do the stupid thing, then we should be unaliving people who curse their parents because that's true justice. We should be
Okay.
unaliving adulterers. And if you don't want to sign up for that, well, then you're talking out of both sides of your mouth.
Okay. So, if you look at the Bible again, I think if you read what Jesus says, like he says to love your enemies, right? Bless those who persecute you. And so on one hand, you can look at that and say, okay, now the Bible's contradicting itself, and you need to kill the Amalekite and you need to kill the adulterer and you need to stone these people. Or you could say what Jesus said, which is he says he's the fulfillment of the law. Like he's like, let's say, the greater
So we
revelation.
try to
So
get away from God's righteous and eternal law as per Psalms 119. We got to distance ourselves from that horrible law because God's justice is not immutable. You see, you're running into problems, and these are the classic problems. So, of course, you're going to have to do his ways are higher, which you already sort of touched on, because you won't be able to answer these questions. God isn't just. If he was, then we would still follow his justice.
so
We
what
don't
standard,
want that.
okay, what standard of justice, like, would you
It's
use to apply
it's
to
the
God?
definition of the word. Like we don't follow
Okay,
we've defined the word. We came up with the word just and we
okay.
define it, right? And we don't define it the way the Bible seems to define it. We've moved away from that. We're not going to unalive people that curse their parents. We're just not going to do it. We're not going to unalive. We don't even unalive people who commit schmurder. Like maybe many, many times, but like if it's one time, we're not unaliving them. But the Bible says do it. We're not going to stone
Right.
people who
So what you're
try
talking
to draw
about
us
is
away
the
from
right,
worshiping other
right,
people. We do not follow
right.
God's
Yeah,
justice.
but what you're describing is the synactic law that came from Moses to the nation of Israel,
We're
and
talking. No,
so
it's the law that came from God from Mount Sinai.
right, yeah, that's the synaptic covenant, and so
Yeah, that
that
came from
covenant,
God,
right,
Yahweh
yes,
Himself,
right, and that
who's
covenant
just.
was to Israel. It was not to the nation, or excuse
Were
me, it's not
those
to the
laws
world, it was to the
just?
nation of
Were
Israel.
those laws just?
I'm not the one. I'm not the
So
arbiter of
so they
justice.
were
Like,
just at a time, but they changed. Now they're not just
no,
anymore. Like,
I'm saying that of course they would be just according to, let's say God's standard, but who are we to judge? Like, let's say if Christianity is true and if there is a creator, like like how do you think you would have the ability to have the sight, the vision, the perspective to be able to make a judgment claim about whether something is just or not if you can't see it? And so if you can't see the repercussions, if you can't see,
I don't
if
know. I don't know what this question
when you,
is.
okay,
So
okay, think about it like
it should be
this. I'll
cut and
explain it like
dry.
this. So if you're a judge in a court, without the evidences, you can't make a good decision. And that's all I'm saying is that we as humans are not informed judges, yet we
Right.
try to make decisions as if we were. And I
Sure.
think that's the problem that you're making.
Yeah,
That's
so
what I would
we
say.
should be, I agree. So what you're saying is, I don't agree, but I feel like what you're saying is we should be stoning adulterers because we don't know why God would have made that law. And just because our justice doesn't match that, we should defer to the arbiter of justice, who is God, and stone adulterers, or just
No, I
unalive them. We
just
don't
said
need to do
no.
the stoning
No,
anymore, of
no,
course.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying
Well,
that we.
who are you to ask
I'm,
questions of these laws? That's what I don't understand. Like, who do you think you are to disagree and to say, no, let's
I'm
not
not.
kill kids that curse?
I'm following
We
in the
should be.
footsteps of I'm
Let's
following in the
go to
footsteps
Congress, let's
of
go to our
okay.
governments, and we should match
Sure.
our laws to the biblical laws because God is ultimate justice. He's all just. That's why Jesus' sacrifice wasn't fucking stupid. But obviously it doesn't work, right? That's where the rub is.
Okay,
Do you
Joe. Hey, man,
understand
it
where
was
the rub
really,
is?
yeah, man. Yeah, it's really nice talking to you. I hope you have a really good evening. Thank you.
Doesn't like the rub.
Are you dropping yourself, or do you want me to drop you?
No, I'm trying to find the button. Thank you.
Oh, I'll do it. Well, you're just talking and talking and talking and yapping and saying absolutely nothing. Oh, was that a runner? I guess that is kind of a runner. That we haven't played this forever. Where did you run, oh Christian? Where was the speed?